You can forget about that. I don't think that ball's come down yet. Made a good lane for Spooner with the backhander. That's nasty. Smack to center, long run. Rottenberg, oh, she caught it. Stop. That surely must be illegal. Welcome back for episode 9 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Gosh, what did we talk about last week? That's how far into this project we are. But hey, thanks for everybody who stuck around. I'm still really enjoying this process, putting out an episode every week, sometimes more, and I hope all of you do too. So we've had a couple of weeks in a row with guests on the pod, tons of great NFL talk, and the 2 longest episodes of White Noise Sports so far. First, it was the emergency NFL draft recap with Zach Metz of Upgood and Waldo. Then last week, it was Kenyan defensive line coach Isaiah Fleming, and with the length of that recording, I had to split last week's episode into 2 parts. I really do hope everybody enjoyed that NFL Hall of Fame tier list, though. That took far longer to make than any other episode so far. Of course, with adding guests, we also got some stronger opinions, too, and that was a lot of fun. I can't make any promises about the schedule of guests, but just trust that I'll do my best. So, you may be wondering what's on deck for this week. Well, I'm going to start by looking at all the NFL signings since the draft. Believe it or not, this really nondescript week in May has tons of them. There's 3 historic extensions I want to take a look at, a couple of late career mercenary deals. Oh yeah, and there's Chase Claypool taking Stephon Diggs' number. If you thought all the juiciest deals and drama of the offseason had come and gone, never fear. I'm going to start just the same way I did in the very first episode of White Noise Sports. Shout out to everyone that's caught all the episodes since then. Here's my take on the biggest NFL roster moves so far in the month of May. Starting with the 3 huge contract extensions. One's for a guy you might have heard of, if only because he's Taylor Swift's boyfriend. Travis Kelce became the highest paid tight end by average annual value with a 2-year, $34.5 million extension. That pushes him just over, believe it or not, the Giants' Darren Waller. The Giants have had a really bad habit of misusing their money recently. I'm not here to bash New York today, though. I think that's going to be easy enough in the regular season. So let's talk about the Travis Kelce extension. There might never be another player more deserving of getting the biggest contract at their position. No one can touch his production, his reliability. He goes out every single year and produces more than most teams' best receiver. Like it or not, he's just as important a piece in the Chiefs dynasty as Patrick Mahomes is. Hopefully that makes somebody angry. He's going to continue breaking records from the best tight ends of all time, like Tony Gonzalez, Gronk, Antonio Gates, Jason Witten. If these are his final 2 years in the league, he's going to get paid like a king, and he's going to earn every penny. He'll still have 2 really good chances to win a Super Bowl, and he can cement his status as the all-time greatest tight end. I really like this show of respect from the Chiefs. Another massive extension that came out recently is a lot more about potential and less about production or reliability. The Patriots gave defensive tackle Christian Barmore 4 years, $92 million after 3 years on his rookie deal. Barmore was a second-round pick in 2021, and like everyone else from Alabama ever, he won a national championship as a sophomore before declaring for the draft. In 3 years, he's picked up 12.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, knocked down 9 passes. Now, are those good numbers for a second-round defensive tackle? Absolutely. But almost all that production came this past season, including 8.5 of the sacks. I also mentioned this in my very first episode. Defensive linemen that have breakout years in contract seasons get huge money nowadays, vastly outpacing the contract growth of other positions, and I don't think they should. New England just has so many other needs. Yes, homegrown talent and developing guys is awesome, but it's not a luxury that they have. You could bring in 3, 4, maybe 5 quality veteran free agents. Instead, you completely tie yourself to a defensive tackle with 1 year of good production. Hopefully that's the only negative thing that I have to say about defensive line in this episode. Of course, myself being a former defensive lineman in college, but defensive tackles in today's NFL do not deserve this kind of money. So the last historic extension just broke on Monday of this week. The Buccaneers signed safety Antoine Winfield Jr. to 4 years, $84.1 million, putting him a fistful of money per year above Jair Alexander for the highest paid defensive back of all time. So a few things to think about with Antoine Winfield. Is he necessarily the best safety in the NFL? I could really go either way. I'll leave that up to casual viewers that have no idea what a safety even does. Wink, wink. What I can't argue is that he's by far the most valuable defensive back. Let me say this slowly and allow it to sink in a little bit. He plays safety, and he led the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in sacks last year with 6. That's absolutely sickening. He also tied for the league lead in forced fumbles and fumble recoveries. One more time, he plays safety. No other player in the entire NFL fills up the stat sheet more, not even TJ Watt. If you're trying to come up with an argument for another guy that might be more valuable on defense, just stop it. Surprisingly, when it comes to Antoine Winfield, his only Pro Bowl was in 2021, but it was rectified a bit with a first-team All-Pro nod this past season. It was a travesty, though, that he didn't make the Pro Bowl. The Cardinals' Budda Baker and the 49ers' Talanoa Hufanga were the NFC selections. Budda Baker didn't have a single interception, forced fumble, fumble recovered, or a pass defensed in 12 games. That's the exact reason why the fan vote should not be the deciding factor in the final Pro Bowl rosters. Don't mean to be too hardcore, don't mean to be too critical of the voting process, but come on with those numbers. Let's zoom out and see how these deals affect the rest of the league. Literally whatever number you want to throw out for the Chiefs, it would be worth it to pay Travis Kelce that much. He's the best tight end, and he has been ever since Gronk hung him up. There is no competition there. No one is going to reset the tight end market for a long time, and it could end up being the Lions' Sam Laporta who eventually does. Maybe the value on that position becomes capped at something like $20 to $25 million a year, which I think is reasonable. There are 17 total defensive players making more than $23 million a year heading into 2024. Every single one of them is a more established, consistent, older, and more mature player than Christian Barmore. Think Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Chris Jones. For New England to sign a defensive tackle of all positions for this much is a huge reach. They could have let Barmore play out the last year on his rookie deal and then made a decision. They could have drafted another young D-lineman this year in the meantime, and they didn't. I'll always love the trenches, but this is just too much money for Christian Barmore or any defensive tackle not named Chris Jones. The Antoine Winfield deal really surprised me because I gotta be honest, I didn't know that Jair Alexander was the highest paid DB of all time. Still, I don't see why safeties should be paid less than corners. A vast majority of the time, they have to be more involved in the run game. They have to not only get everybody in the front 7 going the right direction, but also make sure everybody's 100% on the same page in coverage. Many times a team's best safety is their signal caller too. You could recognize those guys because they wear the green dot that indicates they have the radio receiver in the helmet, and I just think so much of that isn't picked up on the cameras on game day. I hope that if any other safeties, especially ones that play in the box, start to put up the same kind of crazy numbers that Antoine Winfield is putting up, that their value will go up. All I know is, doesn't matter what I say, I am not the one signing the checks. We've got a handful of other deals to talk about here, most being free agent signings. So here are some of those deals that might be able to move the needle for some teams in need. The Bills signed inside linebacker Deion Jones. He's going to join his 4th team with the Bills. He played 13 games with the Panthers last year. He's always been great in coverage. Believe it or not, Deion Jones leads all active linebackers in defensive touchdowns with 5 and in interceptions with 13. He was probably the smartest and the most productive linebacker among available free agents. It's a good, probably very cheap 1-year deal for Buffalo, although we don't have the contract figure. Michael Gallup, formerly of the Cowboys, is off to the Raiders on a 1-year deal. He had 1,000-yard season back in 2019, but he was always a little bit underused in Dallas. He still has some of that juice left, I would guess. At only 28 years old, he could take over that number 2 receiver role from Jacoby Myers and show it. Allen Robinson's heading to his 5th team, the Giants, after he played 1-year mercenary deals for the Rams and Steelers. He's heading into year 11 with 3 1,000-yard seasons, over 7,000 career yards, but only about 600 in the last 2 years. Believe it or not, though, he's only going to be 31 this year. He's got a lot of mileage on him, but he's always run nice routes. He's 6'2", 220, does a good job attacking the ball. And don't forget, the Giants still need more options on offense even after drafting wide receiver Malik Neighbors from LSU. I have kind of a soft spot for Allen Robinson as well because he wants to be a sports broadcaster after retirement. And I think receiver's perspective is underrepresented from the booth, so good luck to him. Bud Dupree is a 31-year-old outside linebacker with 53 career sacks. He led the Falcons with 6.5 last year, obviously, not a very good pass rushing team, and joins the Chargers on a surprising 2-year, $6 million deal. Like most later career contracts, there are performance incentives in it that brings the max value to $10 million. The risk is minuscule here, and the reward can be big if he gets a lot of sacks. The Chargers needed, and they still need help on defense, and really athletic rotational rushers are a valuable commodity in the NFL. Now on to a couple of signings that are not going to pay off. These guys are just so far past their physical prime, or they bring so many other issues with them, whether that be on or off the field, the teams would just be better off leaving them alone. Odell Beckham Jr. might be trying to chase another ring by taking his talents to South Beach, joining the Dolphins. Good news for Miami is his deal's only $3 million base, with another $5.25 million in incentives. To Odell's credit, he caught 35 balls, made a number of big plays with the Ravens last year, and actually averaged his highest yards per catch ever at 16.1. Still, Odell has torn his ACL twice, typically brings a bunch of drama and those aforementioned off-the-field issues. Plus, he's stepping into a receiver room that kind of already has all the talent that they need. The Dolphins are loaded on offense, and I'd be shocked if Odell even repeats the production that he had last year. Now, this is the most Cowboys thing ever. Ezekiel Elliott's heading back to Dallas for a second stint. He rushed for over 8,000 yards in his first 7 years there, then inexplicably joined the Patriots last year, and he averaged, unsurprisingly, 3.5 yards a carry. Does that mean he played terribly last year? No, but it's not fun to watch. He has over 2,000 carries under his belt, and people have pointed out for at least a couple of years that his initial burst is just gone. Dallas has broken up an offensive line that used to dominate, plus Tony Pollard, their top running back from last year, is on the Titans. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Cowboys end up one of the worst rushing teams in the NFL, if Zeke becomes totally ineffective, and if they throw the ball at a higher rate than they ever have in franchise history. That's how much I dislike the signing. This last signing, I'm going to try not to criticize it too hard. The Bills, to their credit, have been quite active. They recognize that their Super Bowl window is still open a little bit with Josh Allen. They knew they needed a receiver, though. They traded out of the first round in the draft and then took Keon Coleman at number 33, the first pick of the second round. He still hasn't signed his rookie deal yet, by the way, but the Bills also signed Chase Claypool. Claypool played in 3 games with the Bears last year and 9 games with the Dolphins, totaling 8 catches for 77 yards. I understand if you don't have supreme physical talent. That's exactly what kind of happened to me playing college football. But Chase Claypool is literally the closest build to Calvin Johnson that the league has seen since Calvin retired. Claypool is 6'4", 238 pounds. He ran a 4.42 40 at the combine, and he can't even get on an NFL field because he's so unreliable. It's easy to make a low-light reel of only plays where Claypool just kind of doesn't give any effort. He's just out there occupying space. It's so bizarre to see that. It makes me wonder what the film sessions are like during that next week. If you take a play off, that play is just so much more likely to fail. If Claypool could get his head on straight a little bit, work incredibly hard on his knowledge of the playbook, become a better teammate in Buffalo, then he already has all the physical ability in the world, and he could make a difference. I'd wager that he doesn't make the final 53-man roster, but even if he does, I don't see him contributing much. I think what all of these signings prove is that it doesn't matter the pedigree of the player, their physical stature, their age, none of those things. If you think you can still play and you're in the NFL, you're going to get a chance to prove it. Incentives are all the rage in contracts for older players, and I think it's great for the league. Here's one of the hottest takes I might ever make here on White Noise Sports, so pay attention. Someday, the contract value for all non-rookie deals should be determined by players' average value in production from their previous contract. I realize it would mess with the risk-reward ratio of big contracts, but it would save us all in the world of sports talk a lot of arguing over who's overpaid or underpaid. For the next segment, it's time for another installment of Unwritten Rules. We've already had one interesting discussion from the NBA playoffs this year. That was the flagrant foul called on the Heat's Bam Adebayo against the Celtics' Jason Tatum. I'm looking at 2 more controversies from the NBA today. First one is the 4-game suspension for Patrick Beverley of the Bucks. He was in a little tizzy, if you will, after a fan said something to him during Game 6 of that Bucks-Pacers series. The Bucks were getting throttled, by the way, and about to lose that series with under 3 minutes left. Pat Bev threw a basketball into the stands and is rumored to have hit a woman in the head. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that probably wasn't his intended target, although that does not excuse him at all. He got the ball back from a different fan, and here's where the audacious part really comes in. Threw it again. Fool me once, then you can't get fooled again or something like that. The unwritten rules here are that you have to have thicker skin as an athlete, and you have to learn to lose with grace. No matter how upset you are, no matter what's said to you, and listen, former athletes, current athletes, we all know it can get pretty cruel. There are lines you cannot cross. You throw a punch, you're ejected, fined, suspended. You make contact with a ref, you're ejected, fined, suspended. Those are all clearly mapped out in the rulebook. This little fracas might have some nuance to it in terms of, is he directly forbidden from throwing the ball into the crowd if you can't prove he's trying to hurt someone? But grow up, honestly. The Bucks season is over, so I'd like to think Pat Beverly's going to serve that 4-game suspension when the team plays some pickup street ball over in Cancun. In reality, it'll start at the beginning of next year, and he's a free agent, so some other team might inherit that 4-game suspension. The other incident I'm interested in involved Jamal Murray of the Nuggets. It's similar to the Pat Bev play in that it involved a tantrum from a guy who's played 7 years in the league and knows better. So Jamal Murray hopped up from the bench area and he threw a heating pad and a towel onto the court during live play during Game 2 of the conference semis. The Nuggets would go on to get crushed in that game by the Timberwolves 106-80. You notice how these incidents don't really happen to the guys on the winning team. It would have been a little bit better if it weren't during a live play with the ball at that end of the court. For that reason, I think it could have been quite dangerous. Unfortunately, the officials didn't notice it immediately because they're watching the actual basketball play. So the result was Murray didn't get a technical foul, wasn't ejected, wasn't even warned. The news came down last Wednesday that the fine would be $100,000. And this is your daily reminder that much money just doesn't mean that much to a lot of pro athletes. So why the real disparate outcome of these two events? Both guys threw a fit in games where they were getting blown out. Both could have caused somebody to get hurt. They're both fully aware that they can't do what they did. Intent is a big part of the equation to me. Think about a pitcher hitting a batter with a fastball high and inside. If it slips and there's no reason to think that the pitcher intentionally did it, then you play on. If there's any motivation, though, think about history between two guys, a retaliation, or a bad call from earlier on in the game, then that's an ejection at minimum and probably a suspension for the pitcher. I'm going to drop in one historical baseball fact that I just learned from a great book I've been reading. It's called A History of Baseball in 100 Objects by Josh Leventhal. Have you ever heard of the Cleveland Indians' Ray Chapman? In 1920, he was the first and only known MLB player to die from being hit in the head by a pitch. Did they have batting helmets then? No, but that's not the point. Come on, guys. Don't make the game any more dangerous than it inherently is. At least Jamal Murray's transgressions weren't as personal. I think that's why he avoided a suspension. For Patrick Beverly, though, really bad look, and you break the unwritten and written rules at once, that's a big stain on your basketball resume. So that'll do it for episode 9 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Like I said in the intro, I'm still enjoying putting out episodes every single week, and I hope you're enjoying listening. Next week, it'll be time to go back to the NBA playoffs. I'll bring you a recap from the semis and all my predictions for the conference finals. I'll tell you who have been the most pleasant surprises and dismal disappointments in the playoff field. Finally, many of you have waited for over a decade for EA Sports College Football to return. I'll go over that viral cover and the things we learned from the full reveal earlier this week. This has been episode 9 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me.
And that ball is launched. You can forget about that. I don't think that ball's come down yet.
Made a good lane for Spooner with the backhander. That's nasty.
Smack to center, long run. Rottenberg, oh, she caught it. Stop.
That surely must be illegal.